Okay. Good morning, everyone. Uh, my name is Saham. I'm the Director of Technology at Falcons Creative Group. And I guess we are going to talk a little bit about the careers that you can find in 3D animation and simulation. And I guess I wanted to start a little bit today and kind of speak about my journey that could hopefully help maybe like share, what it is that sometimes you never know where your path might lead you. Um, I actually got into animation and visual effects when I was very young. My first computer was like a Commodore 64 and an Amiga, and from that, learned to just literally big floppy disk or even lines of code, enter it, and see what happens. And then eventually kept moving on, and video game systems are really influential in my life. Where the Ataris, I mean, we'll go back to NES, Genesis, all that stuff was really like interesting stuff. How are they making pixels move on the screen? So eventually, going through high school, I got introduced to a really influential character in my life. He was my graphics arts teacher. So the same classroom where you would learn learn Photoshop or Illustrator or even the print press and screen printing and all that. Got really interested in that type of media, and eventually got exposed to 3D. At that time, it was lightwave 3D. I got really, really excited about that. And so, back in the early days of the internet, went and found software online, at that time, 3D Studio Max, and kind of started home teaching myself how to do things like, let's make a rock look like it's floating in space with particles and all this weird stuff. Um, and then eventually, after high school, I went to college. I went to the Dave School here in Orlando, Florida. Graduated back in 2003, and I went because I was wanting to do animation and visual effects. How to do this stuff for video games, movies, television. The skill set applies to so many industry verticals that it's so valuable. After I got my animation degree, and I actually first job got to go out to London and work on a TV show. When I was a technical director for 2 seasons of a TV show called The New Adventures of Captain Scarlet. And some teachers might remember, maybe not. There's a show back in the day on what do we got here? The Thunderbirds. That was the American version, where it's like marionette puppets. Well, the UK had their own version, and we got to take a marionette puppet show and bring it to the 21st century by making it completely CG. But while doing this, I was exposed to the network side, the technical direction side, where people are writing code and custom stuff to do things quicker, faster, better. And so after coming back home to the States, I went back to school. I already kind of had a little background in IT and just knew computers. So I said, all right, let me get my degree in information technology. So I actually went to Valencia and went for my computer engineering degree. But then I found myself less and less wanting to be behind the box making the animation, but rather in the behind the scenes, even further, creating networks and managing infrastructure that allowed studios and places that were media houses to exist. And so I went and I worked at Dave School for a bit. I worked out in California. I worked out in New York. I worked out in Texas, New Mexico. But the type of work was everywhere. You could do. I've worked for simulation companies, gaming companies, publishing companies, magazines, um, indie game development, visual effects studios. Worked on several television shows. Have my name on several films. But the skill set just went across many industries, not only because I knew as an artist how the people were actually going to be trying to work and create the media that they were being asked to create, but also on the back end knowing limits and how to overcome limits, because I would best understand the underlying hardware and technology or infrastructure. So with that, now I'm so lucky to have found a home here at Falcons, which is a architecture design studio in Orlando that has allowed me to further take my passion and just run with it. you know, I am the director of technology here, and so my day-to-day is, you know, keeping networks up and making sure the animation studio and the design side have all the resources that they need to achieve what it is that they're doing, but then thinking about the future. You know, my side nerd hobby is I'm always tinkering, and so with whether it's, you know, robotics or small electronics or creating systems or figuring out how to do 6DoF tracking and all this stuff that just kind of is this nebulous cloud of tech that we know today. I get to just kind of play with it. I mean, literally, we're in a, you know, while being here, we've put together products where, you know, like 5-10 years ago, I'd be like, no way, I'm going to be doing this. But we invented a product called Game Suite, where you can imagine, if you will, it's like a holodeck that you're in a room that you get to play the game. And having the resources and ability and an incredible team of people that helps you kind of put this stuff together made it happen, you know. But I got to flex my ability and understanding of how media works, understanding how optics work, the data portion, like how are we getting the video feeds to these projectors and minimizing latency, and let's incorporate motion capture. Let's get tracking systems to figure out where people are in 3D space so that people don't have to hold controllers in their hands. And coming with that type of background, you know, again, from visual effects, liking games and some engineering, and putting it all together to kind of create cool new stuff is where it's at. So it's really exciting to kind of do this stuff. And I mean, it's been very, you know, it's taken care of me, and it's allowed me to grow, start a family. You know, I'm doing great, and I love having every opportunity like this to talk to the next generation and explain to them how, you know, sometimes it's hard. I remember when I was in school and I was like, man, how does one get to, you know, seeing these people living their lives and enjoying their lives? And it's very confusing. But in the end, you know, now that I'm here, I really just wish that I had somebody telling me, hey man, it's gonna be all right. Just do what you love, and you know, and don't be afraid to try new things, and mix and experiment. I think that's you know, the artistry and the technical and kind of putting those things together. That was what made me excited. So whatever it is that excites people to create cool things, and I think that's what we should all try striving for. Didn't know. Let's see here if I can show. No, I cannot show that. Okay. Yes. I didn't know if we have any questions.
Currently, there's no questions, but for those who are interested in asking a question, please don't be shy and type those in. In that control panel, there should be a little drop down that says questions. While we wait, I have one. You talked about a bunch of different industries and places to live. Where was your favorite place to live, and what was your favorite use of technology in a different industry?
Yeah, good question. So it's hard to pick one favorite place to live. I personally loved New Mexico. It's beautiful. It's just you know, the high desert. It was great. It wasn't overpopulated. It was just a stone's throw to LA, and where a lot of the, you know, business was happening. But you know, when I was there, it was, I think, almost ahead of its time. But we were kicking off studio because the state was gave us the ability to leverage a supercomputer. So when I got called over there, there's a supercomputer called Encanto that they have. It was a 14,000 core liquid cooled SGI supercomputer that Sandia National Laboratories and Los Alamos Institute would actually use to do the really important stuff, medical simulation or nuclear simulation or any of these things. Well, the state said, well, it's coming off its uses case for these guys, and we want to open it up to the taxpayers. So we as a private company went there and said we want to use this to render. And at the time we were before cloud rendering was a thing. We were doing it on what we would call now a private cloud, but leveraging hardware that wasn't mine and using it to draw pictures and then bring it back. In fact, the film at that time that we were working on was George Lucas's Red Tails. And so there's actually shots in that film that were rendered on the supercomputer that originally was only responsible for doing really crazy important stuff. But again, I love Florida. All roads ended up leading back to Florida. I mean, we have our problems here, but the climate is beautiful. You get the beaches, and the media industry is starting to gain and pick up steam. When I was at the Dave School, it was always a thing that we'd always go every year up to the Capitol and try to get the film incentives renewed whenever they were expiring. And we had it for a few years. It's kind of gone away, but it seems like media and production starting to pick back up here in Florida, especially South Florida. And then here, right in Orlando, I know if anybody knows this whole creative village concept that's been talked about for many, many years, where the old Amway Arena and that area is finally starting to happen. And I think, I don't know the current status of it, but, EA has committed to being there. Right across the street is the House of Moves Vicon motion capture stage run by FIA. And it's gonna finally allow a complex to be created for digital media and simulation and medical simulation companies to go and have a resource pool of all the people that kind of love the same stuff all around us.
All right, so now we have some questions pouring in. From Freedom High School, they want to know what type of films did you work on?
Cool. So theatrical films. I've done some short films. So if I can try remembering, you guys are welcome to check out my IMDb. So the last movie I think I worked on was Kevin Smith's Tusk, which was it was a horror movie, but the opening sequence where they show a guy kind of playing with a sword and then accidentally cutting his leg off. Yeah, that was actually I was the cameraman. We shot it in the owner of Dave School's at the time's garage, and we did the visual effects right there at Dave School. And then before that, there was TV shows like Hawaii Five-O, Fringe. And then the Red Tails, and then To Write Love on Our Arms was another film that a small short budget project that we did.
So from Boone High School, they would like to know how long did you go to school?
Good question. So I don't think I followed the traditional path that most people would do because of the internet. And so originally out of high school, I went to Dave School. That's a one-year program. And then immediately after Dave School, I went to work. I kind of did a lot of self-teaching. When you're in this industry, you can't ever sit still. You are always, there's new technologies, new softwares, new techniques, always coming out. And so learned a lot, but then I did end up going back to school because I thought it would be nice to have a piece of paper. And so I went after my computer engineering degree, and it pretty much firmed up. I knew a lot, and then it kind of formalized everything. So that was probably another 2 years, and then just from there, I don't have any other than like certifications and maybe like training programs. I don't have any more education. Everything else is self-taught on the job in developing new techniques and technologies with people at studios.
So from Ocoee High School, what are the benefits of the career that other jobs don't have?
So it really, I guess everybody's different. For me, it's very fulfilling to know that I make a difference in what I'm in the company I'm at and what I do. So for myself, though could work at a big movie studio or could go really hopefully anywhere, I prefer to work in a small institution where it's easier to steer the ship because big studios, they're giant machines, and if things have to be changed, a lot of moving parts and pieces have to be on board, and it's always hard. Uh, but keeping it a small studio and being able to influence the direction of the company, that for me is fulfilling. And then furthermore, in media, it's just fulfilling because there's there's actually something you create. And when I was in television and film or even games, there's credits, and you're like, okay, cool, I got to see my name on the screen. For me, that was awesome in the very early stages of my career. But then I wanted to have something more and leave something that wasn't going to disappear after 3 months in the theater. Uh, so having the opportunity of being at Falcons is actually something that's really cool because now, yeah, we get to make a film or we design a building. Well, now that building's up for 20 years and your name might be on a plaque somewhere, and people get to go experience something that you've created, and that's extremely fulfilling. Not well, the films are one thing, but you never get to see those people. It's happening in a theater. But now, one of the projects we did was the Kennedy Space Center Astronaut Hall of Fame right here in Titusville. And one, being able to go there and seeing what we created was amazing. But the two, going there with my family and then just kind of quietly sitting in the back and watching people walk through this building, watch our movie, and go learn and see all this stuff, and seeing how the kids, their eyes lighting up, and the parents just being like, wow, this is so fascinating. That's incredibly, incredibly fulfilling.
So from Apopka High School, what do you see as the future for video games, and how far away are we from mass producing virtual reality type of games for most households?
That's a good question. So it's a problem we face every day here at Falcons. Actually, uh, it's a loaded question. So the problem with virtual reality is it's twofold. So in the early days when the Oculus was a Kickstarter, right? Um, People forget virtual reality is not new. It's been around since the 80s, 90s. But the thing is, it wasn't very accessible. It was very expensive hardware running on very expensive computers. And so what happened in the last few years when it was the Oculus was on Kickstarter is it basically democratized the technology. And now we're at a point where video cards, GPUs, are so fast that it's making it a possibility where you and I can have virtual reality at home. Now, the biggest issue was, so we got faster and faster and faster computers, and we were all happy. But then virtual reality hit, and then it was like, oh man, these computers aren't fast enough anymore. And the reason for that is, we're used to watching a video game in a frame, right? Or a movie or anything in a cinematic frame, 4:3, 16:9, whatever you want to call it. Where now virtual reality is all around you. Though we only see, whatever our point of view and our FOV is, it's all around you. There's several ways of doing it. There's 360 VR video, which is an interactive, but then video games, right? The computer has to figure out everything going on around you, and you don't get to cheat nearly as much. So I guess part of your question was also, well, before it's at home and way accessible. Well, also it's about that hardware. Yes, there are a lot of people that can have a decent computer at home, but there's a lot of people that can't. And so what is the way to get this technology into people's hand? Well, the simple answer ended up being mobile, right? Phones. And so phones are getting better and faster every day. Google has their AR API that also does VR, and Apple will soon be releasing their hardware that is tied with their API. But phones is what is most proliferated across everyone in the society, right? Almost everybody has one. And so now that we have a compute device in our pocket that can help do this for us, it's getting inching closer. The bigger issue then also becomes is now drawing those pictures takes a lot of power. Well, batteries haven't really kind of gained in capacity in a long time. We've kind of been flat for the last 10, 15 years. And so battery technology is going to have to be something if we're going to want to keep the compute localized onto our phone. But then we start talking about cloud and 5G, and what does that mean? Well, now imagine that you don't need to have that $2,000-3,000 computer or even that $1,000 phone to be able to look at these pretty pictures in virtual reality. where now it's all being rendered up in the cloud and is streaming to your phone over a wireless connection, same way that Netflix works, except now your phone is kind of also talking back and forth. It's like, hey, I'm looking over here now. And then it has to tell that to the computer in the cloud. It renders that image and then beams it back down to my phone, all under 15 milliseconds. Because the more latency you have, it starts to break the experience. So how close we are, I don't know. I wish I could. I wish I knew, but I know that what I've seen in the last 5-10 years would lead me to believe that it's definitely getting better, and probably in the next 5 years there's going to be a breakthrough and or technology is going to do a leapfrog where we're going to just kind of change the way we kind of tackle a problem. And then it's up to content creators to leverage it to make really cool stuff using that technology.
So the next question, if a student is interested getting started in this kind of a career field, what would their next steps be?
Well, let's see how many different angles there are. There's been an interesting thing in visual effects and digital media in the last few years. First, Hollywood visual effects back in the day required very, 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 very expensive computers, right? And lots of money, and the average person didn't have it. Eventually, that software and hardware democratized, got cheaper, and now people have iMovie at home and can download free 3D animation software that has been community driven because it's open source over the last 10 years to create the same type of visual effects that people in Hollywood can make it on very expensive software. And so if you want to learn, so that's been the traditional way, like of learning to do this stuff. Where now game engines, if anybody's familiar with things like Unreal or Unity, are different technologies that the gaming world has used, but now are starting to cross over into visual effects. So I would almost say, because in the future, very well, everything is going to be real time. Nobody's going to want to wait for animation or renders. Uh, you're going to want to learn things like Unreal or Unity game engine packages, but there's a whole set of components to that. Sometimes not one person can do it all. So some people are interested in being Photoshop people. Well, that's great. Photoshop people are people that can do texturing and look dev to make the 3D model look the way it's supposed to. Well, there's also technical people. So if you're into programming, go take computer science or programming courses at your school, because those languages will help you write code, which will make you very valuable at a company, because things out of the box do things great. But if you can write something that minimizes the amount of clicks you do, that's very valuable. So, learn to code. If you want to get into what we would call rigging, which is, putting controls and joints and stuff into a character, and so that when you drag the slider, everything just kind of happens. That's another skill set that you would want to go and learn through animation. Illustrator, design. There's so many facets to digital media. Video editing, color theory. Just general drawing. Any one of these courses could probably, you should find what makes you excited, and then see how that skill set can translate into an industry, right? Example, if you like Photoshop, well, what industries use Photoshop? Well, magazine, design companies, companies that have like an internal art department for products, animation, visual effects studios, gaming studios, medical simulation, all of these places could leverage somebody that knows Photoshop. So just kind of find out what you actually like to do and then see what industries could leverage it.
Perfect. We're down to just the final 4 minutes. There is currently no questions in, but if you have any last remaining questions you'd like answered, please make sure to type those in. So what would be your final thoughts to a group of seniors about to graduate, or your big tip to give them?
Man, I hope I don't upset the teachers. College isn't always the only answer. There's just so much education freely available out there, that you can really give yourself a leg up by, taking the time, investing in yourself, and teaching yourself something. Because there's no better skill set than one that you've kind of dedicated and wanted to learn by yourself. College is great. There are many, many, many different career paths that can result from a college degree. It's definitely not a bad thing. Some people just aren't geared for it. Some people can't afford it. Some people can't, just they. I know several people at my studio that are just like, I could not deal with that. I just like to draw, and this is what my passion is. And they are so good at what they do. It, for us here at this company, it didn't matter. Now, the type of company we are is probably very different than a, I don't know, a Microsoft or any one of these places where, being publicly traded, or having to have uh, uh, these type of like requirements to, there's companies that just say, we won't even talk to you if you don't have a 4-year degree. And that's unfortunate, but that's because it's like an old, it's a business that's been around, and they just want to make sure that they can have that type of value in their company. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've worked with many people that have 4-year degrees, and couldn't work their way out of a paper bag, because it's just you're just learning how to do this one thing instead of problem solving. And what, for me, what I've been able to see in any media studio is, you are valuable when you can solve problems for the company and or yourself. And thinking outside the box and coming up with solutions is what is makes you valuable to just about any company.